I'm Connor Rebush, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello and welcome to Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush, and Patrick Wyman is with me. We've got a great show for you guys today. Later on, we're going to be talking about the main event of UFC Saskatoon. That is Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. Great fight in the featherweight division. And just a reminder before we get into the episode proper, that event will also mark the first ever Heavy Hands live cast. You can find us on YouTube during the event. Of course, you'll have to find your own feed for the fights. I believe the prelims are on Fox Sports 2 and the main card on Fox Sports 1. Don't quote me on that. They might all be on Fox Sports 1. But Pat and I will both be calling the fights, giving you our analysis and insight during the action. So we hope that you enjoy that. We are really looking forward to it. But before we get into any of that, we are very excited to be joined by UFC welterweight contender Tyron Woodley. Tyron, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, no problem at all, man. Glad you guys had me on.
Absolutely. And we were thinking we might start with a question that I'm not sure many people ask of people such as yourself. Many people probably know this. You hit really hard. And we were kind of wondering, what is it like to carry so much natural power? The people talk about natural punching power like it's a blessing, but it seems like it could be kind of a curse as well. Do you think does it cause you a struggle at all to learn new skills, to practice technique when you know that you can basically take anyone out with a single punch on any given day?
You know, it's a blessing to have that in your back pocket because it's not that you just can go out and knock out each opponent and make easy money, but it's just a concept of knowing that you pose that threat. So everybody who you fight, they have to be cautious that at any point this right hand can touch that chin, and you can wake up talking to Stitch Durant. So for me, it's like, just really not trying to overly utilize it because you know that people are cautious of it and waiting on it. And usually when I land a big shot early, what happens is I go head hunt and I want to land a big shot and I want to get the fight over with. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So as long as I start the fight using combinations, if a big shot comes within that, I'm usually able to go back to using combinations again and not just going seeking for that one power shot.
So are you saying it gives you difficulty sometimes when you do land a big punch early? Do you kind of get tunnel vision?
Yeah, when I land a big shot early, I go from thinking combinations in my mind to thinking one or two punches. More power than speed and more, cruel intentions than setting something up.
So in Strikeforce, you were more or less a pure wrestler with occasional moments of striking. But then when you fought Nate Marquardt, you kind of seemed to put everything together. And since then, you've been a pretty willing striker and a consistent knockout artist. I mean, so how did that come about? Like, was it a long process of transformation that led to that point where you felt comfortable with it?
No, what it was just basically me training for many, many years with high-level striking coaches and boxers. And I just needed to get myself to a point where I was just confident to actually try and use it. Like even throwing a jab. When you throw a jab, you have to think, if I step in with this jab, they might throw a right hand or they might counter it or they might, you know what I mean? So it's always that option. But when you start getting better at your defense, you start knowing that you have good takedown defense, you're more likely to take those risks and close that gap because you feel comfortable. You feel comfortable that you're able to react and continue afterwards.
I was wondering, Tyron, we've seen a lot of those improvements. Your game has continued to develop. We know you've just been training at ATT. We saw Duke Rufus in your corner in your last fight against Kelvin Gastelum. How much of your training do you do at either camp these days?
It just depends on who I'm fighting. I'm splitting it this time, so I'm going to do half at Duke. I'm going to do half at ATT. I just like the philosophy, the fight philosophy that Duke brings to the table. He's one of the most experienced but quiet and humble beings you'll find. For his level of experience and the proven products that he's had with Anthony, Ben, and some of the other fighters he had at the gym, he doesn't come around as if he knows everything. He's really always trying to learn, from anybody. So I like that fighting philosophy. And as far as strategy, working with Dean Thomas has been a blessing to me. He's like a genius when it comes down to break guys. He knows me more than he knows any fighter. He knows my strengths, he knows my weaknesses, he knows my buttons to push. And just ATT's a great team. And, they've allowed me to have this partnership with, Duke. And the goal is to make me the best fighter. And if that's what I need to do, they support it 100%. And that's why I fight for ATT.
So you have a really interesting arrangement then. I mean, and having spent time at two of the sport's biggest and most respected camps, like, do you feel like you get different things from each camp? Like, are there specific things that you work on more at one than the other?
Yeah, for sure. I think Duke's camp is a more intimate setting. It's not just a free fall. You can't just walk in and I want to train. And I hate that ideal anyway. Fighters think that just because you had a damn fight, you should be able to come to a gym and train for free. That's the stupidest thought ever. So it's a more intimate setting. It's controlled to the fact that it's times when we're working on stuff that is specifically for the exact opponent. I'm looking at the exact look that I need. And these guys, a lot of times you get these younger training partners. They'll stay in character. They'll beat Johnny Hendricks. If they get hit in the face hard, they don't switch back to themselves and want to retaliate. They can stay in character. So that's kind of Duke's setup. ATT just been, when I walk in the door, man, when I just smell the gym, when I just look at those pictures hanging from the wall, I just feel like it's fight time. And that's what I'm doing at the second portion of the camp. Get myself ready, go down there, get in fight time mode, and also just the training partner and the resources are tremendous there. Just having so many different options and people that are willing to help you because it's all about being number one. I do think ATT is the number one camp.
That's really interesting. You mentioned opponent mimicry going on at Duke Rufus's gym. I know you said you work with Din Thomas, and I believe he's got like an independent scouting service that he's doing now. How does specific opponent preparation differ at ATT under Din Thomas as opposed to under Duke?
Din Thomas is like this. He has an MMA scouting report, which you're speaking of. So MMAscoutingreport.com, if any of you guys have any needs to break down an opponent to a molecule where, that big technique ends up being a crumb when you look at it a million times and cover it. But the thing that he does, he's really unbiased, man. He's had to break down fights for Rob B. Did a breakdown fight for Thiago, who's fighting Condit. I'm pretty sure he's going to break down Condit for Robbie. And with so many top welterweights, man, it's an opportunity for us to always make it to the top. But the bad thing is, I had a talk with Robbie the other day. I'm like, shit, man, we just keep getting so close to each other. And just that thought, it bothers me. But, it's great for ATT.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the top camps in the world. It's been really interesting watching the resurgence there. And every time you talk to fighters from ATT, they talk about that bond. Like talked about it with Robbie, talked about it with Jason High. Like there seems to be a real sense of closeness there. So how does that translate into your training sessions when you guys all know each other that well?
It just basically transitioned into a family. There's a lot of teams, there's a lot of camps, a lot of individuals, but I can honestly say American Top Team is a family. And I've been spoiled because I've been with ATT since 2005. I've been fighting for 10 years. I've been fighting for the same team for 10 years. I've never switched camps. I've trained and I've traveled and I've visited tons of camps. But my loyalty has always been with the same team. Their loyalty has been with me. And they watched me come from a training partner. I wasn't even a fighter yet. I was just a wrestler that was getting his butt kicked by Thiago Alves, Steve Edwards, Dean Thomas, and I came in just, with that wrestling pedigree and that pressure and that conditioning, and then I evolved. I took my lump. I started in the amateur. Then I made it to fighting a few professional fights. So I've been the product. Someone wants to see how ATT gets can do a feeder program, how they can start somebody from the bottom, I'm like the perfect ambassador, because I don't even know if I don't think I even had a pro fight. I maybe had like one amateur fight when I first met all of that.
So we've talked a lot about how you've made improvements. I'm interested to hear your perspective on the specific improvements you've made. I think we saw a lot of changes and adaptations in your style in your last fight with Kelvin Gastelum. For example, Gastelum tried to pressure you an awful lot, and that was something that you struggled with a little bit against Rory McDonald, but you dealt with it a lot better against Kelvin than you did against Rory. You used a bit of a jab, you feinted to get him to back up, you used a lot more footwork to keep yourself off defense. You were less hesitant with countering him. What specific changes have you made to your training to bring about those changes in your performances?
So first of all, I appreciate that you identified what was going on. A lot of people were watching the fight and they just looking for cuts, blood, and knockouts.
I enjoyed that fight. I was just talking about it on Twitter. I was saying I don't understand why everyone hated that fight so much. I thought it was a good tactical battle.
Yeah, this is and it didn't just happen like that. We trained for it to happen like that. So this kid who's this cardio guy, he gets knocked out, he bounced back up, he's pressuring, he has nothing to lose. He had already beat two big names in a row, Rich Story, and it beat Ellenberger. Not me. I'm not going to be that guy. You're not going to come out here and get your name off of me. So I had to calm this little young stuff down. So what we worked on is that you're right. And it wasn't so much that they just said I had problems with, footwork or getting boxed in. It was the distractions that come in fight camp, whether it's, hey, Tyron, you fight for a world title. Hey, no, you're not. Robbie and Matt Brown to fight for that. You know what I mean? I just think I just measured the weight of each distraction that came towards me. And also, I had so much fun. It was the easiest weight cut. It was the funnest training camp I've ever had. I mean, Duke Rufus, man, I feel like I've known him my whole life now. And he really made fighting fun for me again. And I'm, indebted to him, because he just made it fun. He made it simple. He took a lot of the overanalyzation that I had, and then we worked a lot on footwork, movement, a lot of conditioning, a lot of running, a lot of sprinting, a lot of drills. Some sparring, but, I'm a sparrer. And then sometimes I think that, just from the media wrestling mentality, I need to beat myself and other people up 4 or 5 days a week to know that I'm ready for a fight. And if you see all these guys training camp, man, there's a lot less sparring going on. At least, 50 to 80% sparring. It's a lot less of that going on. More conditioning, more strategy, more timing. When you're a young fighter, you should do it that way. Your body can take it. But when you're a veteran, I'll assume that I'm entering to that point where I'm going to be defined as a veteran. That you either know you tough or you not. You know what I mean? And I think I'm pretty tough. So I just want to make sure I go out there and do the best I can.
And so that's a really interesting point about sparring, because this is something that's been coming up a lot in the last couple of months, especially after Jose Aldo got injured got injured a few weeks out from his fight. It seems like fans have a hard time understanding the balance between not doing hard sparring all the time and then not sparring at all, because you can't just not spar, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, some guys don't spar, and some guys don't spar, and some guys are kicking a lot of ass. And you would never know that they don't spar. And their cardio looks amazing, and they never miss a beat because their body is so fresh and so healing, they don't beat it up and beat it down. I'm not one of those guys. I like to know that I made it to spar round that I wanted to get out of. You know what I mean? Like I sparred yesterday. I was all pumped up about this fight. And then I got this pro boxer that's a southpaw. He's faster than me. He's a better boxer than me. But yesterday I put it on him, and, that never happened. So I was pumped up, and we went pretty damn hard. But to do that every day, Pat Milicic and all those guys, they, before all this science and stuff came, they were the pioneers of world champions. They had so many champs, and that was the way to do it because there was no science to tell them differently. Now, even Pat Milicic, is changing his mindset. Even, Matt Hughes, sort of in his career, started to pull back on the super hard sparring. There's very few camps that still spar like that, AKA, when I go to AKA, brother, I'm almost ready to fight when I go there. Because if you're not, you're going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fact. If you go to AKA thinking you finna do some 50% sparring, some light stuff, you're going to go in there, you're going to get knocked out, you're going to get hurt. You know, it's as close as you can get to a real fight as I've ever been into. And, you know, I go out there when I'm, you know, 2 weeks out from a fight, and I'm really in fight shape already. I want that mental edge to know that I can make it through it.
Is that kind of hard sparring, is that instrumental to the improvements that you mentioned earlier you've made in your striking? You said how it took a while for you to build up the confidence to go out there and even just throw something as basic as a jab, to know that even if the guy were to counter you, you'd be able to take it, and even after that, then to be able to react and not get countered.
Yeah, like you wouldn't be able to tell now, but when I started fighting, man, I used to be terrified of getting hit.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be like, you would think I was getting stung by an entire beehive. But I just didn't like it, and I wasn't, you know, I knew I was athletic, but you know, I didn't know that I would have that type of punching power. But when someone made the encyclopedia for me, and I treated it more like wrestling, and I just had explosive hits and fast twitch muscle fibers, I just basically learned better techniques, better timing, and I think Robbie probably had the most, like, just stand, nobody move, you stand still, don't use your body, just throw your arm and punch this thing as hard as you can. Robbie's probably going to be the mother sucker that hits the hardest.
Yeah.
And then me and Johnny are probably pretty close. But when you put technique and timing and counters and punches you don't see going, I think I'm gonna be right up there, maybe at the top. Because when you watch me knock out Jay Heron or Kashay, it wasn't that we were standing there slugging. I made them miss big, and I countered even bigger, and they weren't ready for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the punches you don't want to hit you, the ones you don't see coming.
We've seen you improve a lot as a counter fighter lately, actually. You know, when we watched that fight with Rory McDonald again, you said there were a lot of things going on outside the ring. We remember all that controversy with the number one contendership. But it did seem like at times, you know, your defense was pretty solid in that fight. You were stopping a lot of the combinations Rory was sending your way. But it seemed like... Oh, go on.
Rory just went out there and he had a game plan. And I'm going to tell you what the difference was between that fight. I was prepared for Rory. Nothing Rory did surprised me. I was in phenomenal shape. I was mentally wired. I had great sparring. You know how you had that last Saturday sparring, and you know you're ready, and you finished on top? I had that moment. You know, there's fights that I fought that my last session was terrible. I'm like, fuck, I might go out and get whooped. You know, but I had everything going. And then I get to Canada, fight week. I'm doing all these interviews, Embedded, the Insider, the Countdown, the Meltdown, any show you could think of I was doing. And I was just too focused on what was going to happen after I beat him. And I think that was a mistake. And then that Monday, they basically said, hey, you know, I talked to Dana, and he's just like, Tyron, you know, the winner of this fight's going to get the number one contendership spot. I'm like, how does that work? And I was just like, the fight really didn't have the same, you know, the spirit that it had when I originally agreed to it. I agreed to go to freaking Vancouver to fight this kid in his hometown with the implication that the winner was fight for the world title. That's a big risk. And I took that, and I had just fought Carlos. You know, I took that fight pretty quickly, and, you know, the sport changes, it evolves. You know, performances come on, they stand out, and then people, you know, fans want to see a different fight, you know. And as you saw, it was a good fight. So they probably made the right choice, but mentally, I just got to focus on Johnny. Now what's next? Now who's after that? Just focus on him, focus on, you know, doing the best I can, and that's all I needed to do. So that fight was more so like a bad dream. You know, I was wanting to punch and didn't punch. I wanted, you know what I mean, do something and didn't, but he really didn't hit me very much. He just kept me contained. And he told me afterwards, he's like, I was just so surprised. We was expecting an animal that we trained for, and they were nervous about the fight. And, you know, he said, you know, if you remember Joe Rogan said, hey, did you think it was going to? He said, yeah, in a perfect world, I'm just really shocked. I'm really surprised. So, you know, Merry Christmas. It'll never happen again. You know, Get in front of me again. This is going down. I owe you one.
So looking ahead to Johnny Hendricks here, because you've got him coming up in a couple of months at UFC 192. It should be a fantastic fight. I mean, how familiar are you with Johnny's game? I mean, because you were both wrestling in the Big 12 around the same time, weren't you?
Hold on one second. One more time.
So how familiar are you with Johnny Hendricks? I mean, did you ever see him around wrestling matches? I mean, how much have you watched of him as you're moving into this fight? How familiar are you with him?
You know, I wrestled that little chubby thing. I wrestled him in the Big 12 finals. I lost a close match to him. That was kind of my spin to get the fight. Is that he was crying and whining that I bit his finger because he decided to put 3 fingers in my mouth. And, you know, I got a penalty point. I lost the fight, basically, because of that. No, not the fight. I wanted it to be a fight, but it was a wrestling match. So I lost the wrestling match because of that. And, you know, if you know about collegiate wrestling and how tough the Big 12 conference is, out of those 5 schools that make up the Big 12, at one point, those 5 schools were in the top 7 of the country. You know what I mean? That's a big deal to be a Big 12 champion. So I was on my way to, you know, winning my second Big 12 title, and that happened, and I was just mad, and I wanted to punch him, and, you know, it's just been a lot of years of build-up, so I finally get a chance to do it and not even be illegal.
You know, it's funny because I've interviewed Johnny. I've interviewed Johnny's coaches, and, you know, a lot, like, people seem to, like, outside of the context of the competition, people seem to like Johnny. But anybody who's competing against Johnny, like pretty much any time, people seem to he seems to get on people. Like there seems to be a real thing there where he inspires a lot of dislike as a competitor.
Well, it's funny because as a competitor, he's always a whiner. You know, I'm not even joking. He's like a big fucking baby all the time. So it's like he complains, he whines, and in wrestling, it's like he always got the referees to be on his side and make the calls for him, but he never needed to. Johnny Hendricks is one of the best competitors I've ever seen in my life. He would never go undefeated during the year, but in NCAA, when it counted, he would step up, and he would step up big, not only for himself to win national titles for his team. Same thing in MMA. You know, just think about him when he was in the WBC. Yeah, he was all right. Then all of a sudden, he just started knocking out Fish and knocking out Kemp and beating Carlos Condon and having a razor-thin match with GSP. He's a competitor. So, you know, I made a big order. I better be hungry because there's a lot on their plate. So I didn't ask to fight him because he's some pushover or some bump off the log. This dude was for real. And he got, you know, the same thread we talked about earlier. He got the left hand that if you get caught slipping and caught waiting and caught, you know, clocking out, he will put you out. And he is a good guy, man. We talked for like an hour in Vegas. You know, I'm over that wrestling thing, but I needed something to make the damn fans want to see this fight happen. So I just had to dig in there and, you know, dig in there and use it.
So, Tyron, we got one more question for you, and then we'll let you go. We've talked an awful lot about the improvements that you've made over the course of your career and recently becoming more of a willing striker, turning into such a potent knockout artist. Are there any hints or clues you can give us as to techniques that you're working on that we might be able to see in your fight coming up in October?
Yeah, you know, I'm working on putting them together, you know. The fights that you've seen, you not see a lot, you didn't see a lot of wrestling. The fights you've seen a lot of wrestling, you didn't see a lot of striking. The fight, last fight, you saw a lot of footwork, angles, great counters, but you didn't see a lot of offensive volume. So the goal is to kind of, you know, strategically put those things together. If you want to take it way, way back, if you look at my first 5 fights, I finished everybody by submission in the first minute of the fight. So, you know, I think I have a nice little basket of tricks, and it's just now it's about being that veteran. I think that's what the veteran does. They put it all together. You know, they bounce back if they get hit hard in the fight, or they get out of the submission if they get put in one. And they always are trying to look to finish and look to win the fight. And that's my focus for this camp. You know, I'm already at a good starting point, conditioning-wise, and, you know, I know he's going to be cutting quite a bit of weight, so it would make sense to do things that are going to wear him down and then, you know, make it a good fight.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tyron. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, no problem, man. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks. Good. Have good luck in your camp. We look forward to seeing you fight soon.
All right, brother. Peace.
Bye. Okay, wait. Stop. Don't skip this break. I know you skip most of them. It's a podcast. It's not a radio show. You don't have to listen to the commercials. But if you follow my very simple instructions, you'll be doing a huge service to Heavy Hands, Pat, and myself. First, go to Stitcher.com or iTunes.com. You can use either of those services to subscribe to the show, which makes it really, really easy to listen to every episode and not have to go hunting for it on our confusing, badly designed website. Once you're there, give us a positive rating and a positive review. That means go to the little 5-star thing and click on the star all the way to the right. That's a 5-star rating. That's the best one you could possibly give us, and like 20 or 30 words about how you enjoy the show. It may not seem like much, but it's a huge help to us, and we really appreciate it. It helps us bring Heavy Hands to an ever-increasing audience, which is just good for everybody. So thank you for listening. Please take the time to give us a positive rating and review. Next time that you're on at your computer, at your phone, whatever, iTunes.com, Stitcher.com, search for Heavy Hands, give a positive rating and a review. Thank you. And now, back to the show. All right, everybody. We are back now to take a look at next weekend's fights. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Tyron Woodley. Such a pleasure to talk to that guy. One of the better interviews I think we've done. We can agree, Pat?
I would say so, yeah. Just an awesome dude. Real pleasure to chat with him.
Absolutely. We got a great fight to discuss for next weekend. That's Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. And in fact, this whole card, and we should remind you guys now, Pat and I will be covering this live. We're going to be doing a Heavy Hands live cast during this event, starting with the televised prelims. So if you you find Conor Rebush on YouTube, you follow our Twitters, we'll be posting links to it throughout the event. If you feel like you want some alternate commentary, you want some analysis as to what's going on, or you want to listen to it if you're rewatching it later, or just listen to it independently if you love MMA that much that you don't even have to be looking at what we're talking about, you can find all that stuff as we come nearer the fight. Just want to remind everybody that we will be doing that. But
it's really unfortunate that the UFC has swagger jacked us by putting Brian Stan on the broadcast, which somewhat limits the extent to which we can improve on the product that they're putting out there.
yeah, unfortunately. But I think we can offer some kind of unique analysis, and unfortunately we don't have earpieces in our ears, and we're not tied down to what the UFC production team wants us to say and point out. So
we can really talk about the stuff that we want to talk about, and
yes.
we don't have to shill for any products. Though, hey, if there's any products that would like to pay us to shill them, we are more than down for that. Our loyalty is in fact for sale.
If you have products that need shilling, please get in touch with us via email. But
absolutely,
the whole card overall, fortunately for us, is a really solid action fight card with some good prospects, some entertaining sounding fights, some interesting style matchups, and then at the top we have, as I mentioned before, Max Holloway, probably the hottest prospect in the featherweight division. I'm not sure if you can even call him a prospect anymore. It's just that he's probably the newest contender, and looks like he'll be a contender for some time because he's so young. And he's fighting a guy who's in very much the same boat, but just has a little bit more MMA experience, Charles Oliveira. And both of these guys went through a lot of lumps earlier in their careers. They fought competition that was too good for them consistently, and it showed. But both of them have made dramatic improvements and gotten better, and now they're both basically making that effort to step up into the upper echelon. So it makes it a really compelling fight from a divisional relevance perspective. From a stylistic perspective, we get to watch Max Holloway, which is just about the best thing ever, because Pat and I both agree that Max is one of our favorite fighters to watch, and easily one of the best strikers in the entire sport right now.
Yeah, I mean, he is a really absolutely outstanding striker. I think it's difficult to overstate the scale of his accomplishment in his last fight. I mean, like Cub Swanson, I think, Connor, you and I probably agree on this, is a top 15 striker in all of MMA.
Sure.
Like one of the 15 best strikers in all of MMA. And Holloway wore him around the cage like a hat. Like, he absolutely stomped him. He beat the ever-loving crap out of him almost entirely on the feet. And then, just for good measure, at the end of the fight, submitted him. Just finished him. Just finished him before the end, because why wouldn't you at that point? When he could have ridden out an easy 30-27 or even 30-26 decision. Instead, he put a stamp on it and finished him.
Almost casually finished him.
Yeah.
Like it was just an elective decision to just put a capper on the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overstate really how good Max Holloway has become, and not like, I mean, you're going to hear a lot of talk from the commentators about the variety of what Max Holloway does, but it's not that his game, especially on the feet, is just broad. It's also deep.
Yes.
You know, like he knows how to do a lot of different things, but he knows how to do all of those different things together. He knows variations on all of those different things that he does. It's not just that he can throw a spinning kick every once in a while. It's that he knows how to set them up. It's that he knows how to throw a couple of different spinning kicks, playing off of different setups. He knows how to counter, but it's not that he has one counter that he likes. He has a whole arsenal of counters. Like, his game is both broad and deep, and he puts everything together in really interesting, really intriguing ways.
Yeah, let's take something as simple as a missed kick or a bailed kick. A lot of times fighters will bail on a kick because it takes a lot of commitment, and they don't want to like spin all the way around and make a big wild miss and get countered. But oftentimes when they bail, they end up getting countered. They leave themselves in difficult territory. So let's compare it with another very solid striker. How about Joseph Benavidez? Bails on a kick halfway through against Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson. And what happens to him? He gets flattened, right? He in bailing on the kick, he leaves himself out of position and mentally unprepared. Max Holloway's understanding of how to put pieces together is so overarching that when Max Holloway bails on a kick, before his foot has even retouched the ground, he's already controlling the other guy's head. He's already thinking of how he can move and reposition his feet to be able to land a punch. And he's usually hurting the guy who just successfully made him rethink throwing his first strike. Like he's not he's a fighter who makes very few mistakes, and his adjustments are very well calculated. And we got to say the same about Charles Oliveira, whose adjustments are likewise very smart. I mean, Oliveira's use of the clinch and knees to set up his guillotines, something Chris Weidman also does very well. That's a great strategy that takes advantage of his height. He makes clever adjustments. I mean, he went for the guillotine how many times on Nick Lentz in his last fight and still ended up getting it. It wasn't exactly Sam Sicilia versus Yautzin Meza.
Yeah, I mean, shouts to the OG homie, Alistair Overeem, for tying together the double collar tie, knees, not so much elbows the way that Oliveira uses them, but tying together the double collar tie, knees, and then the snap down into the guillotine. Yeah. As far as I can tell, he was the first guy to really do that. We've seen it.
You fold him in half and then you wrap up his neck.
Yeah, that was like the combination of those three things: double collar tie, or four things: double collar tie, knee, wrestling style snap down, and then guillotine. Like, got to give credit to Alistair Overeem where it's due, because he was the first person I can ever remember seeing do that back in like 2008 or so.
Definitely the first one that comes to my mind. But again, to Max Holloway, I think that the point you brought up of depth, and I would like to explain what we mean by that, but I think that is what gives him a pretty strong advantage going into this matchup. The thing with Max Holloway is, I cannot remember how many times I and other people have watched fights and said, okay, well, let's say we watched Travis Brown of a few years ago. And we're like, you watch Travis Brown fight, one of the first thing that comes to your mind is, okay, he can throw a Superman punch, and he can throw a spinning wheel kick. None of these things are necessarily landing all that well, but he's throwing them out there. He has yet to throw a single jab. Or he has yet to throw more than two, or he has yet to use one in conjunction with something else. We see a lot of these fighters who pick up on techniques that maybe they think are cool, or ones that they think the opponent will not be able to predict because they are somewhat unorthodox, but who do not learn the foundation on which these pieces must be set. And Max Holloway, well known for his spinning back kicks and for his crazy stance switching, his cage crossing combinations, his somewhat wild style, is a very fundamentally sound fighter, and it gives him a foundation on which to build the rest of his game. So the complexity has to have something firm to stand on. I think particularly if you watch Max Holloway's earlier fights in the UFC, because it's easy to forget how young this guy is and how new he is to the sport. He's only been fighting since what, 2009?
2010. He had his first pro fights as a 19-year-old.
Right, which is insane. He's been fighting for 5 years. Since he came to the UFC, he's fought 12 times. That was in 2012 when he lost his debut to Dustin Poirier. So he's been very active. He's been making very regular improvements. But if we go back, say, and watch his fight with Dennis Bermudez, the big flashy moment from that fight, for Holloway, a fight that he definitely should have won, was a spinning back kick. Bermudez ducked chin first into it, and then a couple more to the body, and then he started to get wild with him by the end of the first round, was throwing wheel kicks to the head, things like that. That's great. But the vast majority of that fight was won by Holloway's jab. And it was not just an errant jab, it was regular, it was stiff, it was well-timed. He would feint it and then throw it, he would feint it and not throw it and throw something else instead, and when it landed, he would take an angle and move. Made it very, very difficult for Bermudez, who kept attacking in straight lines, to get anything close to a successful takedown or to barge his way in without at least eating some leather. And then once he got in, Holloway was off to his side and he was already taking a backward step. Couldn't get a hold of him.
Holloway is at heart a kind of a meat and potatoes kickboxer. I mean,
sure.
he's diverse, and like he's one of those fighters where you shouldn't mistake the flash for as somehow overstepping the substance of his game.
Yes.
Like, the meat of Holloway's game is very basic, fundamentally sound kickboxing. He's got good weight transfer on his shots. He's got really good both footwork and movement. He takes really clean, sharp angles. He's very efficient with the way that he moves in the cage, which is part of what allows him to throw so much volume. Like, the thing that really stands out about Holloway's game is how much output he throws out there. Like, I mean, he is just constantly working. He's throwing 15, 18, 20 strikes a minute. But the reason that he can do that is because A, he's really long. So, but B, because he consistently keeps himself in range. He never takes 3 steps when he only needs to take 2. So that's high level stuff right there. But because he's been in the game for so long, he's consistently been learning. He's picked up on all of that really fast. He's a savant who's been in the gym enough to build on like his natural talent, natural like understanding of distance, spatial orientation, hand-eye coordination, to build on that with just really consistent, fundamentally sound training. Like, you never look at something that Max Holloway does and think like, you know, he needs to work with X coach to fix this.
Yeah.
Like,
you're never asking why did he do that either.
No, you're like, you know, Connor, one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about, we've never made it the topic of an episode, but it's cropped up a lot, is the difference between an organic striker and a rote striker. Mm-hmm. And Holloway, it seems to me, is the epitome of the organic striker.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say. The way that Holloway builds his combination striking, and particularly it makes him so well suited to that. I'm not even sure I like picking up this term, but it describes something very succinctly. Neo footwork. That style of stance switching footwork. It's not exactly neo, but, you know, in the ilk of guys like Demetrius Johnson, guys like TJ Dillashaw, guys like Dominic Cruz, this style of being able to advance by not feeling tied down to any particular stance and using that fluidity to take angles that might be more difficult to take otherwise, that allows him to build volume on top of volume more easily than most fighters. And then you add to that, like, Holloway knows how to pivot. It's not like Holloway is replacing a fundamental aspect of his game with these more unorthodox approaches. Holloway isn't stepping out of stance because he doesn't know how to retreat properly or how to move off to an angle without losing his stance. It's just an option for him. That's what I really like. It does sometimes worry me a bit that if you watch Holloway's recent fights compared to his older ones, for example, that Dennis Bermudez fight, we see a lot more of maybe falling in love with the flash, maybe deciding that the forward assault is more important. But then once you start to feel that way, like, for example, the Cole Miller fight, not exactly an easy one for Holloway. I think he still looked good in it, but it was kind of an ugly fight in a lot of ways. Part of that was, you know, Cole Miller's doing. He's an awkward guy to fight. But I thought it was a performance that maybe hinted at some problems with Holloway. But then watching the Swanson fight, it was almost back to basics.
See, you know, this is going to sound weird, but as not great as a performance like Holloway versus Cole Miller might look on paper, and at the time that you watch it, I like fights like that for young guys in the greater context of their careers. I like knowing that a guy knows how to grind out a fight, knows how to do what he's got to do to win it, that not everything is going to be some like flashy, never-ending assault that's just all going your way all the time.
Yeah.
A guy that you and I are both very high on, Mirsad Bektic. Bektic's first fight in the UFC against Chaz Skelly was very much like that. Like, he had to overcome adversity when Skelly need him on the ground. when the fight probably should have been stopped. It probably should have been declared a no contest at that point. Like a really tough stylistic matchup. When you've got to overcome stuff like that, and I think Miller is a really underratedly bad stylistic matchup for Holloway. When you have to overcome all those things, but you prove that you can do it and you still comfortably take a decision, like, yeah, it sucks because we wanted a barn burner in that fight, and Holloway has become known for participating in barn burners. It sucks when you don't get the candy that you want, but like, it's good that Max Holloway ate his vegetables there,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe it's fights like that have helped Holloway to progress so well. Mm-hmm. Because we saw early in his career, like I said, he was being thrown to the wolves. Dustin Poirier, Dennis Bermudez, Conor McGregor, all of those in his first 6 fights in the UFC. Get a 3-fight winning streak there. And again, like even for a young fighter, Leonard Garcia, that's not an easy fight for a young fighter. Leonard Garcia catches a lot of shit, but a guy who is just going to swing and doesn't give a shit about getting hit in return, that's a difficult type of fighter to face if you haven't had a lot of experience to be able to keep your composure in the face of that.
Well, and also Holloway took that fight on like 2 weeks' notice with basically no camp.
Right.
Which made it even tougher. Like that was I always maintain that Holloway won that fight. Like it gets remembered as
Garcia
Holloway
getting Garcia'd.
Yeah, like it gets remembered that way. I never felt like that. I never really understood that line of reasoning. I thought Holloway won it fairly comfortably, but maybe I'm in the minority on that.
Well, the thing is that my point is that having fights like that may have helped to tailor Holloway, and then just when he's getting on a great run of being really active and running over fighters whom he is quite significantly better than. In one stretch we have 4 finishes in a row. Will Cope, Andre Fili, Clay Collard, Akira Corisani, 4 very impressive performances. Akira Corisani was he went out there and went after Corisani. Maybe a little bit of a sign of Holloway really getting overconfident in his abilities. Then he tries to do something similar to Cole Miller, has some difficulty, and in his very next fight, is much more back to basics. He was still employing the things that he had been adding to his game since the time of the Bermudez and the Garcia fights. He was still switching his stances. He was using a lot more kicks to augment his striking and doing stance switches to change distance rapidly and unexpectedly and move off at unexpected angles. Those things were still present, but they seemed to fit, once again, more firmly into the meat of his game. And I just really like seeing that, to be reminded that there are fighters and trainers out there who learn from their experiences. You get kind of depressed sometimes watching the Diego Sanchez's of the world who lose a fight the same way they lost their last 3, and they say, I'm going to go back in the gym and train harder. And you're like, man, I respect what you do. I respect your heart and will, but it's not just about working harder. You're going to have to make some adjustments. And I like seeing somebody like Holloway, who even at this young age is very clearly making those adjustments, not only in fights themselves, but from fight to fight.
Well, it's funny that Holloway has never, I don't think, spent an extended period of time at one of the big camps. But the guys that he trains with are all really, really good and kind of underratedly good. He trains a lot with Russell Doan, who I like a lot. I think Russell Doan's really a pretty dang good fighter. Mm-hmm. And he trains a lot with a prospect by the name of Loan Tananes, who, give him a couple of years, is going to be one of the next big things. He's currently fighting in ONE FC or whatever one, or just one now. I don't know what the hell they go by. He's fighting over in Southeast Asia. Okay. But he is a really, really, really excellent fighter. And so Holloway is kind of out there in Hawaii doing his own thing, but it's really creative. His coaches seem to know him very well. They seem to know what kind of adjustments they need to make. He does travel around to work with other guys as a training partner, and I wonder how much he's benefited from that. He's gotten brought in a number of times to work as a sparring partner. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm really excited about this fight. And also, we haven't even talked about him really. Charles Oliveira is freaking awesome too.
Yes, absolutely. Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we're going to go over Oliveira, and then we'll give our overall thoughts on the matchup, how we think these two match up with one another. And then if we have time at the end of the show, we'll get to a heavy bag question, and hopefully we can find a good one. All that after this. Okay, so here's another way you can help us out. Go to your couch, lift up the cushions, and scrounge around in the creases for change, lint, like bent paper clips, like a thumbtack that you stab your thumb on and then you scream alone in your living room. Throw all the stuff out except the change. All right, now take that and deposit it into your bank account or your PayPal account. Head over to heavyhandspodcast.com and click on the donate button on the right side of your screen. Whatever money you just found, which you weren't using anyway, send it to us, all right? Because Pat and I will use it. That money helps us keep this show on the air and free of charge, which is great for you. It's great for us because that way we're making a little bit of money. The donations are a huge deal for us. So please go to heavyhandspodcast.com. Any spare change that you might have lying around, hit the donate button on the right side of the screen and send it our way to help us keep this show live. Thanks. And now back to Heavy Hands. All right, Pat, so we haven't given much time to the man that Max Holloway is facing, but Charles Oliveira is definitely no slouch. Like I said earlier, he's had a similar career trajectory to Holloway. The difference is that when he started to have troubles, he felt the solution was to drop down to featherweight. And while we've looked at the numbers, and that doesn't often help out, it certainly has helped out in his case. He's also stopped fighting guys like Frank Edgar, Cub Swanson, Donald Cerrone, Jim Miller, one after the other. Which definitely helps.
The stretch that that Oliveira went on from all before his 22nd birthday, where he fought Jim Miller, Nick Lentz, and Donald Cerrone all in a row, like that's insane. Before his 22nd birthday, he fought all those three guys. It's like it's not a mystery that a young dude who was small for the division got first submitted by Jim Miller, then in a fight that he was dominating against Nick Lentz, did something stupid, and then got knocked out by the much bigger, more experienced kickboxer in Donald Cerrone. Yeah. Like that's not it's not a mystery, but and he struggled a little bit when he dropped down to featherweight. Like he had trouble making the weight, and Cub Swanson just absolutely melted him. He was surprisingly game against Frankie Edgar. Like he was
very game.
He put up a tough fight against Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the start of us seeing the new Oliveira, a guy who is more comfortable in his game. I think what we've seen from Oliveira in the past 2 years is a guy who pretty much knows what he wants to do more than he used to. Like Oliveira has accepted his role as the guy who's going to come after you, grab a hold of you, and knee the bejesus out of you. And then if you take him down, he's going to submit you. Rather than, when he fought Cub Swanson, was just kind of kickboxing with Cub Swanson at range, which is a terrible idea. I mean, I know that was one of Cub Swanson's earliest performances where his boxing really started to shine, but still, there's not really any reason to do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of times young fighters are plagued by questions of fight IQ, and Some guys grow out of it, and some guys don't. Like Dustin Poirier did a lot of stupid shit in his younger years as a fighter, and now Dustin Poirier, but through the benefit of experience, seems to have grown out of most of the stupid shit that he used to do. Yeah. He's matured as a fighter. Yes. Charles Oliveira, it seems, has matured as a fighter. He's remember the way that Oliveira used to constantly jump guard in his earlier fights? Like he used to just jump guard without ever really locking anything up, just because he so badly wanted the fight on the ground, and he was too impatient to either try and not skilled enough as a wrestler to work his own takedown. So he would just kind of jump on it. He would just kind of jump to his back the way that Godofredo Pepe does. Yeah. You know what I mean? There was an element of desperation to his game. And as we know, that's way earlier in the history of Heavy Hands. We interviewed, before Pat was around even, I interviewed Matt Brown. And Brown, who was for so long known for having no submission defense, out of nowhere became a really solid defensive and offensive ground fighter who had no fear of going to the ground anymore. And it's specifically because he stopped being desperate to get back to his feet. That's what he attributed it to. That he didn't fight so madly to get back to his feet when he got taken down that he would walk himself into something. And Oliveira has gotten better on the feet for the same reason. He's not so desperate to get the fight to the ground that he will make a stupid mistake like jumping guard. Granted, he's got one of the most dangerous guards in the entire sport. It's very tricky, and he's got potent submissions. He's got pointy elbows. Just not a fun guy to have your head and arms trapped between his legs. Well, he's still happy to jump guard, but now he only does it when he has something.
Yes, absolutely. It's not. It's a tactical decision. It's not like I need this fight to the ground any way I can get it.
Yeah, exactly. Like before, he would just kind of barely lace up an overhook and jump guard. And now he's like, okay, no, I really have that overhook in there, and I have wrist control on the other side, and now I jump guard.
Now I'm going to go for the triangle or something.
Yeah, like now I have this particular thing in mind. Either I'm either one or at most 2 steps away from getting to the thing that I want to get. So now I'm safe to jump guard, and the other guy isn't going to rear back and just punch me really hard in the face.
Yes,
right?
And then in recent fights we've seen him do what Holloway has done so well, which we mentioned earlier, which is starting to integrate the sort of 2 halves of his game together. Because even when we started to see him finding his identity as a striker against Frankie Edgar, it was like he's going to wrestle and try and grapple you, or he's back to striking. And against Lentz, he showed a really, really sharp, intuitive approach to locking up those submissions using his height and using the submissions almost as his takedown. He didn't have to be a better wrestler than Nick Lentz, because if he could grab a hold of Nick Lentz's head and fold him in half with a knee to the body, then he could work on wrapping up his neck, or then he could try and take his back. Or if Lentz grabbed a body lock, he could work for Kimura and use that to escape. He was using the opportunities granted him by his striking to create those submission opportunities that then made it a tactical decision to go to the ground.
Yeah, which, interestingly, also a thing that Max Holloway does a lot. Holloway does not really have any sort of offensive wrestling game to speak of, but he's happy to jump on a guillotine and then use the guillotine to sweep to top position, and either he's in top position or he finishes the submission. One of the 2.
Or he'll stop a takedown and go to the back or something like that. He's very crafty at getting top position on the ground, or working a good defensive guard without ever having to necessarily take the fight to the ground.
Yeah, and Oliveira is just the master of that. I think Oliveira is probably it may actually be the best, and if not the best, is one of the 2 or 3 best in MMA at doing that.
Yes.
But I think the most dangerous skill set Oliveira has, aside obviously from his just venomous submissions on the mat, is his clinch game. He is a really, really outstanding and creative clinch fighter, and the using the submissions the way that to get his opponent down, the way that you were talking about is one facet of that. But he's also just straight up really good at throwing knees and elbows and control it, and he's got a very tight double collar tie, much tighter than you would expect from somebody who's not exactly like built thickly.
Yeah.
Because he's got great technique. You can see when he grabs a double collar tie, his hands are on exactly the right spot on his opponent's head. His forearms are pinned tight to his opponent's cheekbones. Like when you get a good double collar tie, you should feel it in the inner part of your pectoral muscles, because you're squeezing your chest together.
And the other guy should feel like his jaw's being crushed.
Exactly. And then his elbows pinned very neatly against his opponent's collarbone. Like that is a perfect double collar tie.
And he doesn't wait, which a lot of MMA fighters do. He is immediately whipping his opponent in one direction, then in the other direction, and yanking him into a hard knee.
Exactly.
He's using it to off balance and then strike.
Exactly, and he's got really great technique on his knees. He really gets his hips back and up and into the strikes. Like it's a very technically sound and clean clinch game, and he transitions very neatly between the double collar tie and a single collar tie, works his elbows through and around his opponent's
It's
guard.
effective for a lot of the same reasons that Matt Brown's Muay Thai style clinch has been so effective. He uses switch-ups. He's even got a really nice hip toss and a couple of nice trips that he uses just to keep that grappling threat in the opponent's mind, which makes his knees more effective. When he lands a knee, they drop their hands, then he can throw the elbow. When they try to block the elbow, then he can work for a takedown, or he can go back to the knees. So it's just a very difficult game to deal with. And it's difficult because of all of the offensive options his opponent has to worry about. The difficulty is that, and I think we probably agree on this as well, Pat, Oliveira is almost entirely an offensive-minded fighter on the feet. He has I can say it this way. Charles Oliveira is very lucky that Nick Lentz doesn't hit very hard.
Yes, I mean,
right.
and that's true of just about everybody. That's true of most of the people that Oliveira has fought. That they have not really been punchers, except for Jeremy Stevens. And Oliveira still got himself in a little bit of trouble on the ground with a heavy-handed top control when Stevens was on top there. But yeah, I mean, Oliveira is entirely a come-forward fighter. He offers nothing off of his back foot. Defensively, he's limited almost entirely to his guard. His head almost never moves off the center line.
It never moves off the center line.
I threw the almost in there just to cover something, but no, it never moves off the center line. He's a very upright kind of traditionally he's got a very upright, kind of traditional Muay Thai stance that you don't see very much in MMA. Very light on his lead foot as he moves forward. A lot of punching his way into the clinch, which leaves openings for counters.
He's like a tall fighter in every way because he presents all of the things that make tall fighters so difficult and dangerous. You know, using his reach to come in and using his height to get those leverage advantages and walk you into upward strikes. But then he also has all of the liabilities that tall fighters have to worry about in spades. The vulnerability to overhand strikes, the inability or refusal to get down on the opponent's level, to change levels and move your head, to use footwork to evade when a strike is coming your way. Like, he's just a big sitting duck. The use of a high guard exposing the sides of your body, and just to let the other guy collapse the pocket instead of making him walk through your jab.
Mm-hmm.
It gets in trouble, and especially when you compare him to Holloway, who is similarly long and tall. I don't think he's quite as tall as Oliveira, but he's also a lanky guy. And Holloway does a great job of changing levels, of using his feet, and of constantly keeping his hands. Holloway will often block with one hand at a time, but if he's trying to block a left hook with his right hand, his left hand is ready to jab. He's always got something that's threatening you, which is, again, that's the definition of using your reach. You got to give the guy something to think about, or you're not using your reach. Covering up doesn't do it.
Here's the distinction that I would draw between the two guys. Oliveira fights tall, and Holloway fights long.
Yes.
Like, Oliveira has all, as you pointed out, quite rightly, Connor. Oliveira has all the liabilities of a tall fighter. Holloway maximizes his length. Like, his height gives him some of that length, but he just fights long. Like, it's hard to get in on Holloway. Like, Holloway isn't going to be in the pocket unless Holloway wants to be in the pocket, you know? Like, and he picks and chooses his spots. Like, Holloway still does some risky things, but he does risky things in an educated fashion. He knows the risks that he's taking when he chooses to take those risks.
Yes.
Like,
I mean, he still fights tall well. That's the thing. I think when Holloway has a height advantage, when he gets his opponent bending over, he uses he uses his leverage very well. He's actually, this is something I've only picked up on recently, but Holloway is one of the most consistent fence escapers in the UFC right now. He is very difficult to pin and hold down at the fence, and he uses almost the same method almost every single time, but he's very consistent in getting his overhook, obtaining wrist control, striking with a couple knees to keep the other guy distracted, and then just letting go of the overhook and pushing off and slipping out to the side that he has wrist control.
I mean, not even just when he's pinned up against the fence, he's almost impossible to hold in the clinch, period. Like, no matter where he is.
Yes.
Like, he is there just as long as he wants to be, and he will punch his way into the clinch every once in a while. I don't think he generally tries to do that, but every once in a while he will, and he'll turn a missed punch into a collar tie, fire off his knee, then immediately push off, create space, and escape.
Yeah, but it's a calculated decision when he uses his height, when he stands up tall and makes use of that frame. And for Oliveira, he has no choice. So, I think that's really what. I mean, if Charles Oliveira is going to walk Max Holloway down all night, he's going to be walking into more punches than just about anyone else in the division would throw at him.
Except for maybe Conor McGregor. I think McGregor is really the only guy that you can comfortably say works faster than Max Holloway.
Yeah, and I'm kind of more interested to see this because I don't think that McGregor would allow Oliveira to walk him down. And I think Holloway will. And I think Holloway does very well when he has an opponent coming after him. I think he gets to show off how technical his counter-striking and how technical his jab and his footwork can be. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did get a heavy bag question related to this fight, and I think that's going to serve nicely to frame our predictions for it.
I think so too. And I'll tell you something else. I don't have the soundbite ready, so let's just read the question.
Okay, so this question comes to us from Miguel Class on Twitter at MIG Class, and the question is this: whose style translates better to a 5-round fight, Oliveira or Holloway?
Do we both agree, Pat?
Yeah, I think we both agree that it's Max Holloway.
Yeah.
I think Holloway was put on this earth to beat the crap out of dudes in 5-round MMA fights.
Yeah.
Like, tremendous output and a tritive style. He targets the legs, he targets the body. He mixes up his shots. He moves quite a bit, but he moves efficiently in such a way that it's not going to wear him out. Whereas I think Oliveira was put on earth to fight in 3-round fights. I do not think that Oliveira's style is going to translate well at all. He can get to gassing by the end of a 3-round fight.
And
I think that he's going to really struggle. I think he's going to really struggle with Holloway. And I think he's going to struggle, especially if this goes into the 4th and the 5th rounds.
Yeah, and only 2 of Holloway's 7 finishes have come in the first round, and the majority of the rest have come in the third, which just shows you how effective he is at breaking an opponent down. And part of that also comes with defensive responsibility. Being in a position where you have the luxury of breaking the opponent down, which means not being broken down yourself. And unfortunately for Oliveira, and my hope is that after losing this fight, which I expect that he will, he's still a very dangerous fighter. You never know. But my expectation is that Holloway will win here. So then my hope is that Oliveira will take some lessons away from this fight. We'll realize that just having found what he wants to do on the feet isn't enough, that he has to learn how to do it to the best of his ability. And I know that Charles Oliveira, at the very least, can learn to parry more punches, can learn to use his jab as a defensive tool as well as something in order to close the distance, and can have a little more defensive responsibility while walking his opponent down. Because at the moment, he's a lot more Antonio Margarito than he is Chavez. He doesn't have that. He's not making the guy miss as he's coming in at all. He's just showing that he can take it. So I think that's a real liability against a volume puncher, an accurate puncher like Max Holloway.
Yeah, so if we're making our predictions, I don't think that Oliveira is going to make it to the final bell. I think that he's probably going to have some success. I think he's going to come out, and I think this is going to be the best version of Charles Oliveira that we've seen.
Sure.
But I also think this is going to be the best version of Max Holloway that we've seen, and that this is about as bad a stylistic matchup for Oliveira as you can get. I don't think he's going to have any success getting his way into the clinch. I think it's going to be really hard for him to get this into his wheelhouse. I think Holloway will pile up the strikes, and I like him to finish this in the 3rd or the 4th round.
I think Oliveira may have some success getting to the clinch. I think this fight will get more one-sided as it goes on, which is why I really think Holloway's volume style is an advantage for him. But I think early, Holloway has not fought many men who are actually willing to walk through punches. He's fought a lot of tough guys. Cub Swanson's tough. Clay Collard was tough, but didn't really have Oliveira's offensive potency or technique to back it up. Dennis Bermudez is tough, but Dennis Bermudez is wary of being hit. He minds his defense as he comes forward. Conor McGregor does the same, or at least he did at the time that he fought that he fought Max Holloway. Charles Oliveira will not care about taking a punch for at least the first round or the first half of the first round, even if just that. And in that moment, when he does not mind taking a punch, he can be dangerous because Holloway's footwork is great, but he still needs that momentary interruption of the jab to be able to use his footwork. He needs to give the other guy something to worry about in order to find the window to escape. And if Oliveira just walks right through it, that makes him potent. I do think that Holloway will probably knock Oliveira out 2nd or 3rd round. 3rd round seems most likely to me. Oliveira can take a hell of a beating. And I think he's more confident now than he's ever been, which, again, means he can take more of a beating than he used to, and he's always taken one pretty damn well. So I think that just about sums up our thoughts on the matchup. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have enough time to talk about the rest of the card, but fortunately, if you guys tune in to the Heavy Hands live cast this Sunday, August 23rd, starting at the beginning of the televised UFC prelims, you can hear us talk about all of the fights on this card, except for the Fight Pass fights, and I'm sure we'll recap those and talk about what we learned from them in some of the breaks. You can hear all of that live during the broadcast. You can let us be your alternate commentary team, and we're really looking forward to it, almost as much for the reason that Pat and I just don't get to sit down and enjoy fights very much anymore. So I'm kind of just looking forward to having an evening to watch the fights.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hell of a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to doing this. It's rare, especially for a fight night show, that I get to sit down and watch it all the way through. Yeah. I'm almost always watching these on tape delay now.
Yep, pretty much the morning after, something like that. Yeah, you spend all week covering the sport, and then you got to spend your weekends taking care of real life. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But it's fun. The reason we cover this sport is because we love it. So I'm looking forward to it. We hope that you guys will join us. And if not, you'll be able to find split up into 2 segments, both the prelims and the main card commentary. So if you want to watch the card again with our commentary, if you didn't catch it the first time and you want to have us on hand, we will have it for you as downloadable podcast episodes, special editions, in addition to our regular weekly episodes like this one. And you can sync those up according to the notes that we will attach to the episode. We'll basically tell you when to start the broadcast so that it lines up with what you're seeing. So we're looking forward to that. We hope you guys are looking forward to it as well. Should be fun. Should be a nice little test run, and hopefully we can do these things more regularly in the future. Other than that, Pat, do you have any things you need to plug before we get out of here?
I do indeed. I have a couple of things. I mean, first and foremost, I have a preview of this weekend's fight card coming out on Sherdog.com, and this is my last article for Sherdog. I'm leaving Sherdog after this. I'll be. You can find the rest of my articles starting September 1st on Bleacher Report's MMA section. So that's just a little bit of news there.
Adieu, Sherdog.
I'm sorry.
Adieu, I said.
Adieu to Sherdog, but do you have a little bit of news on that front as well?
Do you know who's taken over those previews, Pat?
I don't know who's taken over those previews. Who's taken over those previews, Connor?
I'll be taking over those previews, which means I'll no longer be able to cheat off of your paper for the vivisections on Bloody Elbow when I have to predict the fights.
Well, you're going to have to do it all yourself.
I am, but I will be an even more knowledgeable analyst by the end. It'll be beneficial for all of us.
How ironic is that? That's pretty dang funny. You're gonna enjoy it over there. You're gonna be working with some talented people.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. This doesn't mean I'm not writing for Bloody Elbow anymore. Just doing this on the side. And fortunately, as I start this, the UFC schedule has let up because they had a relentless summer. They dominated the summer with their cards, and now they're back to a more lenient schedule. So I'm looking forward to not having to crank out previews 2 times a week.
Yeah, just wait. You'll get there.
yeah, it should be a blast. Otherwise, for me, a couple of things coming out this week. Most notably, if you are listening to this via BloodyElbow.com, you've probably already seen it this morning, Wednesday. Had an article come out about, I'm speaking about it in past tense before it's published, an article on Max Holloway. So you can see in bright Technicolor a lot of the things that we just discussed from his previous fights, the adjustments he's made over the course of his career, and what makes him such a special striker, and why Pat and I are both looking forward to covering his fight so much. So I think that's probably just about all I have planned right now. There will be other things, of course, blah, blah. I'm terrible at promoting myself. But the important thing is you remember Heavy Hands Livecast this weekend on Connor Rebush. That's the name of my YouTube channel. Should be easy to find if you already know this show. And you can also find links on BloodyElbow.com when that's coming around the day of the fight. You can find links on our Twitter pages, and we will be linking it throughout the show to make sure you can find it if halfway through the broadcast you think we might be a pleasant alternative. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for listening today. We hope you enjoyed our interview. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.